If you were hoping to see the best that the Justice League can be, I've got some mixed news for you. You might have to wait for JL2. This film is fine in general. You see, the League unite as one. The story holes are minimal. I came out having had fun. Ezra is great as the Flash. Wonder Woman goes without saying. So how about the rest of the film? This is old new and now playing.
From the old movies of 30 years ago and beyond,
to the world of the new films of the last 30 years.
to the movies that are now playing, this is Old, New, and Now Playing. And now, here's your host, Will Robinson Smith.
Hello and welcome to Old, New, and Now Playing, your time machine through the world of movies. I'm your host, Will Robinson Smith. Thank you so much for joining me today. And after a mere 5 years and 11 MCU films since the Avengers came out in 2012, we finally arrived at DC's very own superhero team-up movie, Justice League. Now, this is one that I've been waiting a while for. I know a lot of you have been waiting years, decades perhaps, for this movie, and it is finally here. So will it rise to the level of critical acclaim like Wonder Woman, or will it be panned so much like Batman v Superman? We're about to find out. I'm all in. I hope you are too. This is your feature presentation. Justice League, while technically not the first time we're seeing all these characters in the same movie, is our intro to them as a team. The film takes place not too long after the events of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The world is still in a state of sorrow in the wake of the death of Superman, and everyone is trying to figure out a way to cope with this new world without him. As mentioned at the end of Batman v Superman, Bruce Wayne, played once again by Ben Affleck, is still working to bring together heroes alongside Gal Gadot's Diana Prince. Both worry that a threatening force is coming to Earth, and without the Man of Steel, they need to create a team to protect themselves. That devastation comes in the form of Steppenwolf, a powerful alien who wants to, say it with me,
try to take over the world.
It's a bit more than that, but we'll get into it later. As I mentioned at the top, this film is kind of a mixed bag right now. It's got a 39% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, an 86 audience rating, and a B+ cinema score. And the weekend actuals are in. Justice League pulled in $93.8 million domestically. Compare that to the $166 million that BVS got, $133.7 for Suicide Squad, and $103 million for Wonder Woman. Considering that film outlets say the budget for this movie was between $250 and $300 million, and the newest Pixar film Coco is going to be taking a chunk of the family/holiday weekend dollars, and you can imagine that DC is probably none too pleased right now. So what exactly do we have here with Justice League? Well, we'll start our conversation talking about non-spoilery stuff just in case you haven't seen the movie yet, and I'll let you know about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the review when we're switching into spoilers, so if you don't want to hear any of that, you can skip to a time code I'll have at the bottom of the screen, and we'll just jump to the final thoughts of the review at that point. So there were certainly things that I thought this movie did really well. One of them, unsurprisingly, was the visuals. Director Zack Snyder brought on Fabian Wagner as the cinematographer of the film. Game of Thrones fans will recognize his handiwork from his time on the show in episodes like The Laws of Gods and Men from Season 4 and Battle of the Bastards from Season 6. It's a switch from BVS cinematographer Larry Fong, who is busy leading up to this year working on Kong Skull Island and will next tackle the Predator sequel. But going back to Justice League, Wagner created some really fun battle scenes, I thought, and had some really cool visual moments throughout the movie, and definitely leaned toward why you should see it in theaters. Another big highlight is the Danny Elfman score. When you're talking about iconic composers in film, well, you have to include Danny Elfman in that conversation. I mean, the man spans all genres from animation like Meet the Robinsons and Epic to acclaimed dramas like Good Will Hunting, Big Fish, and Milk. And besides his well-known Tim Burton collaborations, of which there have been more than just a few. Elfman has also spent a good amount of time in the comic book world, whether you're talking about Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, all three Men in Black films, Wanted, Hellboy, and Avengers Age of Ultron. But possibly the best contribution in the comic book realm are his scores for Batman and Batman Returns. For me, one of the best moments in Justice League was the integration of the 1989 Batman theme. Plus, I think this is one of those scores that will become more enjoyable the more you listen to it. And watching the various members of the Justice League come together and actually work as a team for the first time on the big screen, I thought that actually worked really well. Even though he's never actually called out by name in this movie, the Flash, played by Ezra Miller, was probably one of my favorite characters here. For those who watched the CW version of The Flash starring Grant Gustin, there was plenty of curiosity and speculation on how the movies would interpret this character, but I thought that his responses to the other members of the League and how he's figuring out his place in all of it really worked for this version. It made the performance distinct enough that I think he can stand on his own and made me even more excited for a standalone film. He reminded me a bit of the Flash we see in the animated Justice League cartoon from the early 2000s. The other two members, Cyborg and Aquaman, played by Ray Fisher and Jason Momoa respectively, worked well too. The Game of Thrones star brought a refreshing New 52 comic style to the character, which made him work on the big screen, and like with The Flash, everything I saw from him in the world of the Atlanteans really gets me going for next year's Aquaman movie directed by James Wan. Casting Ray Fisher as Cyborg made me excited for a couple of reasons. One, since we weren't going to get Jon Stewart's Green Lantern as part of this Justice League, not yet anyway. It was nice to see more ethnic diversity in the team. In the past, Cyborg has been one of the core members of the Teen Titans, but in the New 52 comic book run that started in 2011, he's one of the founding members of the Justice League. The other reason I liked seeing Fisher in here is because it's DC showing that they are willing to find good talent in atypical places. Fisher was primarily a stage actor before landing this role, acting at the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey and starring as Muhammad Ali in the off-Broadway production of Fetch Clay, Make Man. And I thought he brought those acting chops to the role of Cyborg. I did feel coming out of it though that I wanted a bit more from him, and in doing some research for this review, found that there's a good bit of deleted footage from the movie that features Cyborg. But if DC sticks to their announced plan, we should get a Cyborg movie in 2020. As far as Batman and Wonder Woman, I thought they were fine in this movie, although I didn't think that Wonder Woman was quite as captivating as she was in her own standalone film, and I think part of that has to do with the story and the writing, which of course leads back to the guy behind that, in part at least, and that's Chris Terrio. Oh, Chris. He's such a coin toss for me as a writer. I mean, on the one side, he did win an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for his work on the Ben Affleck-directed Argo, but on the flip side, he was one of the principal writers on Batman v Superman, which didn't exactly have the greatest script. Case in point,
You're letting him kill Martha. What does that mean? Why did you say that name?
In Justice League, I didn't feel like there were as many plot issues as I experienced with BVS, but there were some noteworthy ones. I thought that this movie leaned a bit too hard into some deep cuts in the comic book world without having really earned it yet. In the Marvel movies, for example, the fact that we can go into the really obscure with Guardians or Thor is a testament to the buildup that Marvel has created over the course of its filmography. We start with a grounded Iron Man and then progressively work to the strange, pun intended, where we can have big villains like Surtur and Dormammu and are just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. In Justice League, our main villain is Steppenwolf. He's the uncle of Darkseid, the ultra-powerful ruler of the planet Apocalypse. He leads an army of parademons down to Earth to
try to take over the world.
In the Jack Kirby Fourth World comic series, Darkseid is after what's called the anti-life equation, which allows for the control of any sentient being. He believes that part of it is ingrained in humanity. And if you didn't actually pick up on that from watching the movie, don't feel bad. I only know some of that from partly watching the cartoon series in the 2000s and doing some research for this review. I do appreciate DC trying to pull in some cosmic plot lines into their universe, but I don't know, it just felt a little inside baseball. Going back to the Wonder Woman part of the movie for a second, I thought that the Amazons in this movie weren't quite as well handled as the Amazons were in the Wonder Woman standalone movie, and let's use the costumes as an example. When we see the Amazons on Themyscira in Justice League, there are several who are wearing midriff exposing armor while they're protecting an important object. As a functional choice, it just seemed kind of strange to me and only services as a stylistic choice by Zack Snyder and his team. Alright, so there are definitely some spoiler things in this movie that I do really want to talk about.
Major spoilers!
So if you care about spoilers and you don't want any of this to be ruined, go ahead and skip to this time code down here. We'll catch up with you then and we'll go through all the ending thoughts. I'll give you a few seconds.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, so for the rest of us, or if you just don't care about spoilers in general, we all know this was coming at some point in this movie, either halfway, more, the resurrection of Superman. I thought the initial scene when he's reborn and doesn't know who he was actually really cool at first. That turn when he stares down Barry in the Speed Force was amazing. And maybe if I see it again, this next little bit won't irk me as much, but I thought that just bringing out Lois Lane to snap him back was both interesting and it also felt just a little too convenient. Almost like,
Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name. It's his mother's name.
However, when you see them all together fighting Steppenwolf, not gonna lie, that was pretty badass. Back to Superman for a second. You know, when he comes back and Batman is like the only one that he really recognizes and he's confused and filled with rage, but he remembers that this is the guy that, you know, tried to kill him. You'd think that he would just, I don't know, go after Batman a little harder than he did and there'd be more of a point of contention there, and there wasn't. That was a little unsatisfying to me. And okay, one more thing and then we'll move on past Superman. Okay, so at the end of BVS, we see the dirt rise on his coffin, right? So why did it take being dipped in the Kryptonian chemical combined with the power of the mother box to bring him back to life? And if Doomsday stabbed Clark in the chest and he only has one costume, how does it magically get fixed when he comes back? For that matter, how on earth did Superman know where his costume was to begin with? Wasn't it taken off his body when he was dead and buried? Sorry, that was a lot of things. Let's move on. The other scene that I thought was an excellent standout was the story of Steppenwolf's first time on Earth. The battle of the armies of Man, the Amazons, and the Atlanteans was really cool to watch. And we got our first look at a Green Lantern in this cinematic universe. However, that prompted two significant questions for me. First off, if Steppenwolf invading the Earth and trying to take it over was enough to bring a Lantern into the battle the first time, and there's supposed to be a Green Lantern protecting the Earth pretty much all the time, why wasn't this one enough to bring one down in this movie? You know, where was he or she? Also, and credit to Collider's Adam Chitwood for pointing this one out, if Steppenwolf was waiting for the death of Superman to return to Earth, why didn't he attack in the thousands of years in between the first attack and when this movie picks up? I mean, there's no Kryptonians, and so it really doesn't make any sense. I don't know. All in all, is this a horrendous movie? No, not at all. There were a lot of enjoyable parts and some that I felt like could have used some tweaking, but bearing in mind that Joss Whedon stepped in before the principal shooting was finished to redo a number of things after Zack and Debbie Snyder had a personal tragedy, I thought the movie turned out pretty decently. I'm certainly looking forward to what the DC Universe turns out next, and hopefully the response from this movie will help shape that in a positive way. I give the Justice League a 6.5 out of 10. It's one that if you're going to see it, really should be seen on the big screen, and be sure to stay for the mid and after credit scenes. So those are my thoughts on Justice League. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about the film, so after you've had a chance to see it, go ahead and jump in the comments section and let me know what you thought. And for those that are waiting and hoping to see the just Zack Snyder version of this film with the junky XL version of the soundtrack and score, that's never gonna happen. So you can just stop waiting for that. But if we get lucky, maybe we'll see the mustached version of Superman on the DVD/Blu-ray extras. That would be cool. I would be down for that. Plus there was a ton of footage, well maybe not a ton, but there was a good amount of footage that was in the trailers that was not in the movies, so hopefully the home release will be packed full of deleted scenes and just explanations of how the Joss Whedon, Zack Snyder mesh worked. That will do it for this episode of Old, New, and Now Playing. If you enjoyed this review, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and become a subscriber to the channel if you haven't already. That way you can keep up with movie reviews and other videos that are coming out in the future. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at W_RobinsonSmith. Thank you so much as always for watching, and I will see you next time.